In Lewis Carroll's 1865 novel for children, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, a young girl called Alice follows a white rabbit and falls down a rabbit hole. Alice enters a fantasy world where she encounters many strange anthropomorphic creatures and has a series of surreal experiences. Hi, this is Mihnea. Welcome to UpLife. In my book, The Matrix and the Alice books, I explore aspects of intertextuality in the motion picture The Matrix and the books Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. The series of lectures on literary theory is inspired by my fascination with the connection between literature and film studies. Today, the phrases falling down the rabbit hole and follow the white rabbit have become synonymous with beginning a journey that is strange, problematic, and/or chaotic. It's a phrase that has been widely used in film, literature, and art. In this literary theory course, I invite you to follow me down the rabbit hole and explore the amazing world of intertextuality. Why? Because even discussing Lewis Carroll's White Rabbit in this context, a video lesson delivered through the internet, implies the use of intertextual relations between the Alice books, the world in the books, and the meaning that contemporary culture attributes to them. This first part of the course is a 5-part introduction to the concept of intertextuality, in which we will define intertextuality, understand what interpretation, reading, and meaning means in literary theory, discuss the origins of intertextuality, and contrast these concepts within the framework of structuralist and post-structuralist theories. As we do all this, I will briefly introduce the ideas of the main thinkers who theorize what intertextuality is. The 5 literary theories we will look at are Julia Kristeva, Ferdinand de Saussure, Mikhail Bakhtin, Roland Barthes, and Gérard Genette. Let's now follow the rabbit and dive down the exciting world of intertextuality. Intertextuality is a set of relations between texts, which can include direct quotations, allusions, literary conventions, imitation, parody, and unconscious sources, among others. Intertextuality also involves assumptions regarding the reader, the situation being referred to, and its context. This is the first video lesson in a new series on literary theory, in which we will discuss the concept of intertextuality in all its aspects. In traditional literary theory, it is assumed that when we read a work of literature, we are trying to find a meaning, which lies inside that work. Why? Because literary texts possess meaning and readers extract it. The process of extraction meaning from texts is called interpretation. However, contemporary literary and cultural theory has radically changed such ideas. It is now believed that works of literature are built from systems, codes, and traditions established by previous works of literature. Crucial to the meaning of a work of literature are also the systems, the codes, and the traditions of other fields, such as film, music, art, and of culture in general. The act of reading rather than interpretation of one work engages the reader in discovering a network of textual relations. Tracing those relations is, in fact, interpreting the text, that is, discovering its meaning or meanings. Reading thus becomes a process of touring between texts. In Intertextuality, Graham Allen, an associate professor in modern English at University College Cork, Ireland, writes, "Meaning becomes something which exists between a text and all the other texts to which it refers and relates, moving out from the independent text into a network of textual relations." To sum up, in literary theory, the analysis of a work of literature involves making intertextual references, extracting meaning, being a critical reader, and interpreting a text. Now you are ready to embark on an exciting journey in the world of literary theory and discover the intricacies of intertextuality. To get you started, I recommend you have a look at Graham Allen's well-written and well-researched book, Intertextuality. See the Amazon link in the description below. The word intertextuality derives from the Latin intertexto, meaning to mingle while weaving. In this video lesson, we will discuss the origins of intertextuality. But first, what is intertextuality? The term intertextuality was first introduced in literary linguistics by Bulgarian-born French semiotician and philosopher Julia Kristeva in the late 1960s. In her manifesto, which includes such essays as The Bounded Text and Word, Dialogue and Novel, Kristeva broke from traditional notions of the author's influences and the text's sources. She argued that all signifying systems, from table settings to poems, are constituted by the manner in which they transform earlier signifying systems. A literary work, then, is not simply the product of a single author, but of his/her relationship to other texts, both written and spoken, and to the structure of language itself. Let us now briefly look at the origins of intertextuality. Like modern literary and cultural theory itself, the origins of intertextuality can be traced back to 20th century linguistics. A major role in understanding intertextuality was played by Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. By emphasizing the systematic features of language, Saussure established the relational nature of meaning and texts. Another literary theorist who had a major influence on the theory of intertextuality was the Russian literary theorist and philosopher Mikhail Bakhtin. According to Cultural Transactions, Nature, Self, Society by Paul Hernady, an emeritus professor of English and comparative literature at University of California, Santa Barbara, Bakhtin emphasized the relation between an author and his work, the work and its readers, and the relation of all three to the social and historical forces that surround them. To sum up, by combining Saussurean and Bakhtian theories, Kristeva produced the first enunciation of intertextual theory. If you want to find out more how culture influences us, I recommend you have a look at Paul Hernady's book Cultural Transactions, Nature, Self, Society. See the Amazon link in the description below. As you learned in the previous video lesson, Julia Kristeva, a Bulgarian-born French semiotician and philosopher, had a crucial role in theorizing what intertextuality is. It is important, though, to note that her work was published during a transitional period in modern literary and cultural theory. This transition is described in terms of moving from structuralism to post-structuralism. In this video lesson, we will briefly discuss the difference between structuralism and post-structuralism. Structuralists analyze texts of all kinds, from works of literature to aspects of everyday communication. These theorists base their analysis on semiology, which is the study of signs, a movement fathered by Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. Post-structuralists, on the other hand, believed in the unstable nature of language and meaning, insisting that all texts have multiple meanings. The transition from structuralism to post-structuralism is characterized by the replacement of objectivity, scientific rigor, and methodological stability by an emphasis on uncertainty, indeterminacy, incommunicability, subjectivity, desire, pleasure, and play. Structuralists believe that criticism is objective, while post-structuralists argue that criticism, like literature, is inherently unstable. But in Structuralism and Post-Structuralism for Beginners by Donald D. Palmer, an emeritus professor of philosophy at the College of Marin in Kentfield, California, what the two theories had in common was the postmodern obsession with language and with the radical claim of the disappearance of the individual. As a result, post-structuralism became an important factor in discussing and understanding intertextuality. If you want to find out more about structuralism and post-structuralism, I recommend you have a look at Donald D. Palmer's book Structuralism and Post-Structuralism for Beginners. See the Amazon link in the description below. Another social and literary critic and theorist who made use of intertextual theory was French literary theorist Roland Barthes. Barthes' position on intertextuality, his belief in plurality, and the freedom of all readers from constraints is characteristically post-structuralist. In this video lesson, we will look at what the death of author means in intertextuality. Concerned with the role of the author in the production of meaning, Roland Barthes believed that literary meaning can never be fully grasped by the reader, because the intertextual nature of literary works always leads readers onto new textual relations. Authors, therefore, cannot be held responsible for the multiple meanings readers discover within literary texts. Thus, Barthes proclaimed the death of the author and viewed the situation as a liberation for readers. He believed that all literary productions take place in the presence of other texts, and only through intertextuality are texts allowed to come into being. In his essay, Theory of the Text, published in Untying the Text, a Post-Structuralist Reader, edited by Robert Young, Roland Barthes writes, "Any text is a new tissue of past citations. Bits of code, formulae, rhythmic models, fragments of social languages, etc. pass into the text and are redistributed within it, for there is always language before and around the text. Intertextuality, the condition of any text whatsoever, cannot of course be reduced to a problem of sources or influences. The intertext is a general field of anonymous formulae whose origin can scarcely ever be located, of unconscious or automatic quotations given without quotation marks. Thus, writing is always an iteration, which is also a reiteration, a rewriting which foregrounds the trace of the various texts in both knowing and unknowing places. It is important to note that these elements of intertextuality need not be simply literary. One also has to take into account historical and social determinants, which themselves transform and change literary practices. Moreover, strictly speaking, a text is constituted only in the moment of its reading. The reader's own previous readings, experiences, and position within the cultural formation also form crucial connections and open new doors to intertextuality. If you want to find out more about the death of the author, I recommend you have a look at Laura Seymour's book Roland Barthes' Death of the Author. See the Amazon link in the description below. The concept of intertextuality is very flexible, in the sense that structuralist critics use it to locate and even fix literary meaning, while post-structuralists employ the term to disrupt notions of meaning. In this video lesson, we will look at how intertextuality is an integral part of literary criticism. Literary critics, such as French theorist Gérard Genette, employ intertextuality theory to argue for critical certainty, or at least for the possibility of saying definite, stable, and incontrovertible things about literary texts. In Narrative Discourse, an essay in Method, Genette writes that the analysis of narrative discourse, as I understand it, consistently implies a study of relationship. On the one hand, the relationship between a discourse and the events that it recounts, narrative in its second meaning. On the other hand, the relationship between the same discourse and the act that it produces it. Narrative in its third meaning. Although intertextuality has inspired various critical positions, it is a term by no means exclusively related to literary works or written communication. Intertextuality has been adapted by critics of non-literary art forms such as painting, music, architecture, photography, or even film. Through the use of intertextuality employed by other art forms, traits of society or periods of history can be captured not only in the written form but also by using visual imagery. Intertextuality as a concept has a history of different expressions, which reflect the historical situation out of which it has emerged. The purpose of this introductory video lessons is not to choose between theories of intertextuality, but rather to present their most important elements and understand the term intertextuality in its specific historical and cultural manifestations. To summarize, we can state that the concept of intertextuality dramatically blurs the outline of texts, making them, in Roland Barthes' words, an illimitable tissue of connections and associations. Of course, it entirely depends on the reader's sensibility and background knowledge to make all the necessary connections in order to get the most out of a text. If you want to find out more about literary criticism, I recommend you have a look at Gérard Genet's book Narrative Discourse, an Essay in Method. See the Amazon link in the description below. The inspiration for this literary theory series about intertextuality is based on my book The Matrix and the Alice books. Consider supporting our project by purchasing a copy. The Kindle edition is only 99 cents. Check out the Amazon link in the description below. To make sure you don't miss the next episode, subscribe to UpLife, a space where we strive for an upgraded lifestyle.